A big g'day and welcome to another edition of the BFNL Footy TV show. My name's Yeendy, excited to be with you as always, and we've got a special guest with us this week. We've got Tara Murray from the Star Weekly. How are you going ahead of this cracking season of footy that's already started?
It is. It started well with a lot of hype, which everyone was sort of waiting for to see how Melton South would come out in round one. So if that's what we're looking for in round one, it's going to be a pretty exciting season.
How are you sort of finding it as a journo, sort of coping with this games, one game one week and another game the next week, and then it's still a little while before we get into the big stuff?
It is a little bit hard to get into the season because you feel like you've got so many teams. I know, speaking to people from clubs who aren't playing until after Easter, I know they're really raring to get into it. So it is a little bit hard, but then at the same time you can give focus to particular teams, particular matches. Like I can say Melton South, they had a really big weekend, not just football but across the board, that you could really get into them and what sort of happened there.
Yeah, exactly. Considering their recent history, to walk away as a club, they had 8 wins from as many matches against Melton, which I don't think it's been a long time since something like that's happened where they've had the clean sweep.
It is, definitely. I know senior footballers hadn't won since July 2015, and their A-grade netballers hadn't won since the week before that. So their winning drought was a week longer than the senior footballers. So for both of them to get wins on the board and their other 6 sides, it was a massive weekend for the club.
And in close performances as well. Before we talk about senior football, there was a nice little milestone in the reserves where the man known as Zippy walked out for his 400th game and a winning performance at that.
It was. So Matthew Collins became the first Melton South player to play 400 games across the senior club. So he's played a lot of his career in the reserves. He's played in 2 premierships. I think he's coach reserved, coached under 18s, won best and fairest, won a league reserves goal kicking award. So he's done a lot for that club, and while he's played 400 senior games across the club, he's also, he reckons, probably close to another 200 at the club as a junior. He started at the club as a 5-year-old, so
wow.
From 5 through to 18s, and then he's played 400 across reserves and seniors. That's
amazing. Congratulations to the great man, and great to see him getting cheered off the ground by his teammates as we pump up senior footy. And it was a typical Melbourne day. It was we had all sorts of conditions, headlined by a lot of a bit of lightning surrounding the ground. We know lightning did strike the junior carnival, the junior lightning premiership. I think it struck some of the facilities nearby, so that resulted in day 2 being cancelled on Sunday. So congratulations to all those junior participants there across football and netball who were able to be a part of the day. I know one of the finals was cancelled due to bad weather, but we did get some bad weather down at the Melton Rec Reserve. Melton South end up winning 10-19, 79 to 10-5, 65. 14-point result. Was that the result you were expecting?
It was always going to be an interesting one. You've got 2 teams who have brought in quite a few players, so it was always going to be about how they gel. Everyone's spoken about Melton South. They've brought in Fev, Tate Pears, Nick Comer, Mitch Banner. So they've brought in a few guys. Mark Lynch is another one. Several guys, so they've probably got 7 or 8 different players than they've had the last season, so it's going to take time to gel, and obviously the weather played a part in that second half. No one was going to play clear football. Melton is another one that's got quite a few new ones, especially in their forward line. You've got Ben Archard, Angus Grigg, Matthew Huckstep, so you've got them as well. So both sides were looking to gel and see how they could go with their new players.
That was what happened in the first term. For Vola, we had the dream start. He kicked the first goal of the game 4 minutes in, but then the game started to balance out a bit.
It was. So I thought both sides had their opportunities in the first quarter. Melton didn't make the most of them. Their kicking inside 50 was horrible in that first quarter. They weren't giving their forwards the best opportunities, weren't helped when Angus Grigg was yellow carded and sent from the ground. So both sides were playing that loose man in defence. I'm not sure who started, whether it was they wanted that loose man, Melton wanted that loose man to go on Fev, but it ended up there was a lot of kicking straight to Melton South defenders from Melton. At the other end, it was the Fev show. Fev kicked 4 goals, won all of the Panthers' goals in that first quarter. He was out marking 2 players at times, so it looked like Fev was on for a really, really big day.
Watching that performance in the first term, for me, I was absolutely thrilled to see Favola in action and kick plenty of goals, but he kicked 4 of 4. That raised alarm bells for me straight away, because my instant reaction was, okay, he's kicking goals, but who else is going to get on the scoreboard? And that proved evident in the second term when Melton started to gain dominance in the second quarter.
Exactly, and I actually spoke to their other coach, Sean Triplett, after the game. Obviously, Fev had kicked 4, and he said they wasted opportunities. When he gets hot, they're going to look to go to Fev because no one can stop him. So he said Fev could have got more if they had have kicked properly to him in that first half. So that was something I looked at and thought, okay, they've only got the one option, but it is something they did focus on.
And Melton, they had a good run of momentum in the second term. They actually managed to make most of their kicking efficiency, which lacked in the first term, and they're able to take a handy, I think it was about a 16-point lead into half-time, and then the weather hit.
It was, and Melton looked really good in that second quarter. When they got it forward, they were making the most of those opportunities. They were kicking straight, which sometimes when you kick poorly in front of goal, it's bad football. So they were kicking straight, and they deserved that 15-point lead at halftime. They were the dominant side in that second quarter. Melton South only got one goal through Mitch Banner, so there wasn't much there in regards to Melton, and I know they were pretty disappointed at halftime.
The third term, we saw wet, windy, stormy conditions, and I don't know, I can't remember whether the lights were end up being turned on, but the policy of not having any cars in the ground went the other way, and we started to see the cars being let into the ground because of the horrendous conditions. Melton South started to make the most of the opportunities. Vola, I think, kicked a goal in that term and really started to balance things up at three-quarter time.
They did, but yet again, Melton South were wasteful in that third quarter. They managed to take the lead back at three-quarter time, but they could have been a lot further ahead. Most of the play was spent on their half-forward line, and they didn't make the most of that.
We saw some drama in the final term, a shot from Favola at the social rooms end. Arguably went over the post. It was registered as a point. There was a lot of argument whether that was a goal or a point. That would have changed their momentum a bit. And then there was one of the South players did take a mark, and the time off was clearly called. South just thought they'd try and take the advantage of it. Favola thought he kicked a goal himself, but of course the clock was blown on time off. The respective player had a shot at goal, kicked a point, and then all of a sudden the drama and emotion in the game was red hot at that late stage.
It was, and when Angus Grigg kicked the first goal of the last quarter to level scores after Melton South had missed a couple of shots again. So it was drama, and you look like, can Melton get over the top here? If they can get it forward, get it to one of their key forwards, who was starting to have a few shots in that last quarter, could they do it? But in the end, Melton South yet again were able to find the ball, move it forward, and they managed to get the win with Ben Satino kicking a goal from about 50 to really get them over the line.
With the results all said and done now, positives coming out of the Melton camp?
Melton camp, obviously, it's the first time they've gelled together. Obviously, they would have been disappointed with the result, disappointed with how they kicked into the 50, but then they've still got a lot of positives. Their forwards showed glimpses. Second half wasn't ideal conditions for any key forward, let alone ones who are still trying to gel into a new side. So they'll definitely take a lot out of this round one.
Positives for Melton South?
Melton South, they got a win.
Yep.
That's the big positive. They have returned to the winners list for the first time since 2015. They had a lot of pressure on them, and they're expected to win, but to get that win was the first thing they needed to do.
I probably would have thought just a downside to the day is they didn't attract the crowd that they were expecting as well. I think the crowd numbers were a little bit down, but the weather obviously didn't make it attractive as well. So those that decided to stay away probably were a little bit safer in that sense, because there was a lot of ducking for cover, particularly with the wind and the heavy rainfall it hit.
I know I wasn't the only one not prepared for that weather. I think you were in the same situation, expecting lovely weather all day, and we got hit at half time.
Yeah, I'm not a man that likes storms at the best of times, so I calmly sat in the truck of 97.9 FM, who did a terrific job covering the day, as they will be covering Good Friday action as we preview this week's game. We've got Melton South again taking on the Sunbury Lions, the reigning grand finalists. A different side to last year, different coach. From what you saw of South and what you know of Sunbury Lions, which way do you think this will go?
This is one that's going to be very, very interesting for me. Sunbury Lions has been the Ballarat side I've covered the most, because I only took over covering the Melton sides probably 9 months ago. So Sunbury Lions is a side that I've known really, really well. It's going to be quite interesting. As you said, they've got a new coach, they've got a different lineup, so it's going to be interesting how they adapt. I think like Melton South, how is their forward line going to function? They've obviously lost Jack Clant, Josh Burgess, Matthew Metcalf, Jesse McKinney. all guys who can kick goals, how are they going to find goals?
And the key thing you mentioned previously about Melton South and even Melton as well is that they've got a whole heap of new players who haven't had the opportunities to gel so much. But I guess the pleasing thing from the Lions' point of view is that their pre-season form hasn't been too bad. They've had some pretty good performances on the track. So they've been able to get some wins and be able to work some of their structures. So they're starting to get a good feel for where they're at heading into this one.
Exactly. And I spoke to Ben Jordan not long ago, and he said that was the thing. The key for them was coaching these players for the first time, learning what they do well, what they don't do well, and trying to get those game plans and structures, because the new coaching panel came in late in the piece. So for them, it's been about doing that. They haven't got many guys in, but then they do have a lot of guys that have been through their system, have been through the reserves. So there is a lot of familiarity with a lot of these players, not necessarily at a senior level, but they have been at the club.
Tip for this one?
I think Melton South will get over the line, but it wouldn't surprise me if Sunbury got up.
Yeah, I think we'll see a replica of what happened last Saturday, and we'll see a close game. South just get edging ahead, but it'll be exciting to see Sunbury Lions nonetheless in front of a bumper crowd on Good Friday. And if you can't get to the ground, or even if you are getting to the ground, make sure you tune in to 97.9 FM. The guys were in full voice last week, and they'll be again so as part of this big encounter. Tara, thanks so much for joining us this week as part of the BFNL Footy Show. We look forward to catching up with you throughout the year.
Thanks for having me.